real business value from Irwin and Quest Data Management Technologies. Today, we're focused on a simple but critical question. How do organizations make their data ready for AI? The challenge is not that companies lack data. The challenge is that the data is often fragmented, duplicated, inconsistently governed, and difficult to trust. That is why data products matter. Over the next 45 minutes, we'll show you how organizations can move from one-off data projects to governed, reusable AI-ready data products, and how Irwin Data Intelligence, the Quest Trusted Data Management Platform, and the Automated Data Product Factory help make that possible. We'll have slide 2, Jog. Here's our 45 minutes timeline. Start with why the operating model is the real problem, what it costs you, and what changes when data becomes a product. And then with Q&A and next actions. With that, let me pass over to Jog, who will chat about the root cause. Jog.
Great. Thank you very much for that, Alan. And just a quick check to make sure you can actually hear me, Alan. Yes?
Yes, I can hear you.
Great. Thank you very much. So welcome, everybody. And as Alan was saying, this session, we're going to be looking at quite a lot in respects of the Quest Trusted Data Management Platform and the Automated Data Product Factory. But before we go and deep dive into that, this particular slide itself is really talking about the fact that the tools that I've just mentioned, they aren't really the real problem. The problem that we have when we're looking at automation and making things work better, faster, smarter, it's never the tools, it's always the operating model underneath them. And in this instance, it's the fact that the delivery is project-based. So whenever we're looking to deliver products or data assets or data pipelines, they're always designed in a sort of project-based delivery approach. So if we think about how this actually flows, what we've got is that we've got a use case comes in. You know, somebody says, I've got a business requirement, I want to see X, Y, Z, and I want to deliver X, Y, Z, etc. And in response to that, a set of requirements are written, a pipeline gets built, the work is shipped, the product is shipped, and everybody forgets about that and moves on to the next project. So what happens after that? Well, the next time there's a new set of business requirements or a new use case, it starts from scratch again, starts from zero. And so the project team, they have to use the same data, the same queries, the same questions, the same process flow that they go through. And so they end up creating data pipelines again from scratch. And once that's been developed, that pipeline that you just shipped becomes someone else's problem to maintain, or it quietly decays and rots. So that's not necessarily a bug in the way that you're working. That's the model working exactly as designed. And that's because the project model treats every initiative as a one-off. There's no concept of a durable owned asset. So nothing ever compounds, nothing gets built on top of the basic platform that you've got or the basic assets that you've got. So despite your teams being the best of teams and having the greatest skill sets, this isn't really a failure of execution. It's an operating model that by design can't accumulate value. So the question really becomes, how do we move from this operating model to one that better meets the needs of the enterprise? And to see this, let's take a quick look at the operating model, because this operating model isn't free. And let's put some numbers on to what that start from zero cycle actually costs you. So what we've got here is a bit of a summary of some research that Quest has has conducted. And this is the Quest business value assessment which they had conducted, and they conducted this across all industries. And they used what was called the Omdia benchmark set in producing these facts and figures here. And what these facts and figures are doing is they're telling us what's involved when we're doing a project model approach, and then measure those costs in there. So if you take a look at some of these snippets of information in here, you can immediately see that their research has found that it takes something like over 4 months just to get a first usable output. When people are trying to create a project-based delivery of some sort of data pipeline or some sort of reports that they're trying to get. So over 4 months just to get to a first usable output before anybody actually gets to see any value in there. And that equates to over 800 hours of labor per delivery effort, which is quite considerable. So that's the cost of standing a team up and starting from scratch every time that you're asked to create an asset for delivery. Now, built into that then, there's nearly 30% of the effort goes into pure duplication. What we mean by that is you're rebuilding work or you're putting in effort that is rebuilding work that already exists somewhere else in your estate. Of that, a quarter of your effort is rework after the thing ships. So more than half of the effort that you're spending on average is waste that this particular approach bakes into that project-based delivery mode. And the consequences of this are, and the numbers, show this up as very human problems. So the first one is a trust gap. Consumers can't verify what they find in terms of the data pipelines and the data assets that they've got. So what do? They rebuild it. There's an issue of speed and scale. One product can take between 5 to 50 people up to 6 months to deliver. What if you want to do it quicker than that? Can the business or the enterprise actually wait? If you've hired specialist engineers with a set of particular skills and they're finding themselves having to do repetitive work where they're rebuilding pipelines instead of doing creative work, then they feel bored and they are more likely to leave. And so retention becomes a problem. And of course, on top of that, as always, there's always going to be the pressure from the management asking why hasn't their initiative been paid off? Why hasn't the latest set of analytics reports been produced? Why isn't the latest set of assets and functions that they want being delivered? So it's always an issue in there. So what does it look like when we stop running projects and start building products instead of data pipelines? So if we translate that benchmark into a sort of annual operating view, taking a sort of average of an industry, So if we take a typical mid-sized data team running, let's say, about 12 new efforts a year and apply the benchmark, this is the operating model costs that we can generate from that on an annual basis. So the first figure to hit us is the fact that almost 10,000 hours of delivery effort is in scope every year. And that's before a single improvement. So every time you're developing each one of your products in there, each one of your 12 effort products in there, that's without compounding any form of improvement or asset value accumulation. If we convert that to facts and figures in terms of people, well, that's roughly 5 full-time engineers consumed every year just to feed that cycle itself. And if we translate that into a dollar figure, that's about $1.3 million of addressable effort. And then, of course, on top of that, you've got the additional rework of about 2,600 hours on top of that baseline. And so that is the issue there. And so the insight here is the fact that, or what really matters is that teams need to break out of this cycle and they don't need to buy more tools. What they need to do is change their behavior, change the way that they actually work. And so what's this change in the units of work that they produce? So instead of producing project-based delivery, let's take a look at what that new unit of work actually is. So if we think about what I was saying in terms of the unit work of change I just mentioned in here. Now, we've seen this before. If you've been in the industry for a long time, we've seen this movie before, 20 years ago, where software, again, was built once per customer from scratch every time. And then the industry moved along and they productized this software delivery approach, and everything changed. Now, data is fundamentally going through that exact same transition now. So it's moving away from a project-based or a project model-based delivery to a product-based model for delivery. And so what does that mean? Well, on the left of the slide, if you take a look on there, on the project model, every use case starts from zero. You pay the full cost every time of sourcing the data you need, cleaning it, structuring it, building the data pipelines every single time. And none of that work compounds. Whereas on the right-hand side, if you take the product model approach, what you're doing here is you're building the data asset once and you reuse it. It's managed like a product with a named owner, a quality service level agreement. It's catalogued and reused across many use cases, And here's why that matters so much. 60 to 80% of the effort in a data product is one-time reusable work, The project model pays that cost every time, whereas the product model pays it once. So if that's the shift, the question becomes, what does it actually take to build and run data products this way? So how do we move away from that? But before we do that, let's just take a look at defining what we mean by a data product. So exactly what is a data product? So a real data product is something which is governed, it's reusable, it's a catalogued asset, and against it we can apply 5 clear tests. So the first one, does it have a clear business purpose? Because rather than just producing a data pipeline, which could be used for multiple purposes, we're saying here a data product has clear business purpose. It has a named owner, so somebody who's responsible for that. So if things go wrong, we know who to go to. There's a quality measurement and a service level agreement, and that particular asset, the data product, is monitored for its use. There's a published data contract, and by that contract, we're talking about how often is it going to be refreshed, how often are bugs and issues going to be fixed with it, etc. So there's a contract in place in there. And finally, is that data product catalogued? Can it be found somewhere? Is it published? Can it be discovered? And here's the litmus test. If those 5 things aren't true, then it's a pipeline. It's not a product. So with this in mind, why does this pay off? Well, it's because we're putting reusability at the center of a growth strategy. The first use case in developing the data product pays the heaviest price, But the second and subsequent uses of that same data product, they capture subsequent value far faster because the core product already exists. So that 60 to 80% of one-time effort gets amortized across the whole portfolio of the data products that are based on that initial data product. So the product itself behaves like a capital asset. It compounds returns just like infrastructure instead of shipping and ending like a project. So if these are the definitions of what a data product is, let's take a quick look at the sort of real-life examples of data products. So on this slide, what we've got is on the left-hand side, this is, as I was saying, this isn't really theory, it's concrete examples where companies have productized their data first and they've pulled ahead because they've been able to use these types of data products. So on the left-hand side, we've got some generic patterns, yeah. So for example, if we've got a customer 360 profile data product where we are using things like unified identities and common contacts and common consent models in there, that type of content in there, it powers any CRM systems or marketing service or any churn models that we want to do. Yeah. If we look at a sales order event stream, so the source for that is the orders that we've got, the line items, the refunds, the returns, the assets which are governed in there. And that data powers data products where we're looking at finance models, where we're looking at forecasting or fraud scoring. Similarly, if we've got a product catalog master, in there we're going to be looking at an authoritative SKU hierarchy plus pricing for those items in there. And that information powers e-commerce, a pricing engine, and recommendations. Now, obviously, those are sort of generic business examples of data products. However, on the right-hand side, we've got some common retail type of data products here. And again, as I say, these aren't hypothetical because I'm sure amongst us, we've used one or more of these at some point in time. So as an example, Uber, when they build a trip data product, they've got every trip event, it's governed and it's exposed through a marketplace. And again, you've seen that, when you apply or you want a trip to go somewhere, it offers a number of different trips with different prices, different levels of service, different levels of convenience in there. That's all one data product in there. And that powers, the ETA models that you've got in there. It powers the pricing, the dynamic pricing in there. It powers the driver matching and the safety in there. So those are real data products that we can relate to. Similarly, Spotify did it with listening events, where your listening records and your history and other people's history, once it's been cleaned, it's giving you information about the streams, the number of streams that you've been listening to, how often. And that translates into options for providing you with additional information, such as, how can you discover new streams for listening? How is your weekly summaries of the content that you've been listening to? How does it present that in there? Using the same information for calculating royalties and recommendations. And similarly, Netflix have done the same there as well. So every one of these data products is built once and it powers many use cases, and that's the shift. So some of these business leaders are already there. The question for us is, how do we build our own data products without the costs and timelines we saw earlier of a project-based delivery? And that's where the platform comes in that we want to talk a little bit about. So what changes when data becomes a project? So when you move away from a project-built to product-built data, three things significantly change. And the first is faster delivery of new use cases. Yeah, we want to compress the time taken to deliver that. Second, the lower total cost of ownership, because the cost of developing the first data product is upfront, thereafter it's reduced. And third, a stronger return on the whole data practice. And so we're shifting away to one product with many use cases. And that's the shift that we want to move towards. Yeah. So now let me show you how to actually build these without the cost and timelines that we started with. And Quest have produced for us a framework. And in this particular framework, there are these 5 pillars of an effective data product practice. And this is intended to provide a repeatable operating model for building data products. So it's not a one-off methodology. Yeah, it's something which we can instigate and apply and practice on a regular basis. Yeah, and these 5 pillars, yeah, they say, okay, the first stage is define. So we start with a business problem, not the data. Yeah. Design, build quality and governance in from day one, not as an add-on or as an afterthought. Deliver, use automation, testing, cataloging, data ops as a way to deliver this faster. Govern, use a federated model with central standards, but importantly, with some domain autonomy for adjusting the user's requirements based on the specific requirements that you have. And finally, evolve. Treat the data project as a living asset, not a closed, delivered final project. And so for you, this is an important point on how you start. You might be looking at this and thinking, wow, I have to apply all of these from day one. Well, that's not strictly correct. What you have to do is instead of applying it across the whole enterprise from day one, pick a particular business domain, say, for example, like finance or customer, and build just 2 data products inside of that. But against those 2 data products, apply the 5 pillars just for those 2. So you're keeping the scope small. And that gives you the way of an entry point. It's a sort of beachhead where you can land, apply the pillars, develop the techniques, develop the practice, develop the tools that you're using to help you to make an effective use of the whole setup, and then expand from that into different domains and different product sets. Now, these 5 pillars will only work if you've got a platform that actually enforces them. So now let's take a look at how the Quest Trusted Data Management Platform makes each one of these pillars real. So the Quest Trusted Data Management Platform, this will take you most of the way, but it's operationalizing them at scale that takes more than a framework. It takes this platform. And this is where the Quest Trusted Data Management Platform comes in. And so it's got some key differentiators. First, and very importantly, it's a unified platform. It's not stitched. We've got modeling, we've got cataloging, governance, quality, marketplace, all in one native platform. So there's no integration tax, no tool sprawl. There's one source of truth across the whole life cycle. Secondly, we've got a component trust score, because that's one of the biggest things that people do is, can they trust the data that they see in there? So the Quest platform provides a 9-score component trust score. So every product that you get in there gives an explainable, quantifiable score, such as data quality, user ratings, data sources that have been defined. And this approach is not a black box. Consumers can see why to trust an asset before they even use it from the component trust score. And then thirdly, Gartner has got this platform requirements specification for 2028. And the platform is trying to adhere to that so that it's the best of the industry, and that builds in governance, lineage, and AI readiness standards in there. So Quest are claiming this to be the industry's only unified SaaS native platform for trusted AI-ready or AI-ready data products. So let me stop describing it and show you in practice, and let's go in and build a trusted data product from scratch and see how it works in action. But just before we do that, a quick explanation of what you're going to see. So in the demonstration, what we're going to do is we're going to take the automated data product factory, which is the focus on the data product factory in here to build data products. And what we're going to do is we're going to take a real life example where we take a sales performance analytics product. And in step 1 here, what we're going to do is we're going to use a natural language interface where we describe the outcome we need in plain language. So it's no SQL, no specs, no technical knowledge. And the AI interface interprets your intent and builds the logical data product model automatically. Step 2, and this is the important one, the first thing it does, based on your prompt, it says, can I discover any reusable assets? Are there any existing data products? And it does that before it even considers generating anything new. So the ADPF checks whether an existing data product already satisfies your need, because obviously reuse is preferred rather than starting over. And so that's the one product, many use cases principle enforced by the tool. Step 3. The first thing it does, it creates a logical design first, and and that's a business-focused logical model. And then based on that, it says, okay, here's some suggested physical matching assets from your existing catalog of data that you've already got cataloged. Yeah. And if you need to, you can validate those suggestions with synthetic data generated from the metadata. So you can confirm the shape of the data product and the data that you're using before any physical access and physical creation of your data products in there. So that means that governance is happening before you're exposing it and not after. And then finally, at step 4, we publish the assets into the marketplace, yeah, with those scores, with the quality, the governance, the timeliness, everything, publish those into the marketplace in there. So that's the workflow at a glance, 4 simple steps in there, a plain language in, a trusted published data products out. Now let me sort of stop talking in detail and actually show you in as way of a demonstration. Now, we were going to do this as a live demonstration, but for the sake of expediency and time saving, we've recorded this and cut out all the pauses and the long pauses that we have that we would have had to wait in here. So let's dive into the demonstration. And as I was saying, what we've got here that you can see on the screen is the prompt. And the prompt simply says, I want to create a sales performance data product for the sales division. And my business objective is I'm interested in pipeline performance, quota attainment, activity to revenue attribution for sales leadership reporting. And what we've also said as part of the prompt is, and I know it says entities in there, that could obviously be nouns needed or objects needed, whatever wording that you want in there. But the sorts of things I'm interested in are accounts and opportunities and the sales reps and the pipeline, the quota, sales activities, territories, all the business nouns that I will be using as part of expressing my requirements. So based on that, what we do is we take that and feed it into the prompt in here. And I'm just going to go in and copy and paste that into there. And now we push that into the prompt into there. And the first thing you'll notice that it's done is it's started to work straight away, starting to think. And it's thinking about the logical requirements to satisfy the data products. It's thinking about what assets are already available in the data catalog of assets that you've got in there. And it's looking at those and the relationships between those and saying what is the most suitable set of assets for use here. And it proceeds through there, and you can also see some relationships being added in there. So there are some associations of how that data has been joined up together. And that's obviously useful. And also what it's done now, it's come back up here, and can you see the prompt in there, or the prompt box is now active again. What that means is it's not a single one-shot engagement with the AI. And what we're doing is we can have a conversation. But again, for the sake of expediency, I've limited it to that one single prompt. But there's nothing to stop us from now going into them and saying, okay, take this factor into consideration, or here's my refined requirements. And it will engage in a conversation with you to show that and update the content in here. So if we've got our initial output in there, the first thing that we can do is start looking at that and saying, well, sorry, let me just go back on, I've missed a step here, right? So the output that we've got in here, you'll notice that there are 3 different color codings in here. So these logical entities that it's popped up with here, coded in blue, they are basically telling us that whilst these are logical entities with their attributes, it has already identified a set of data assets, and those will be tables and columns from the data catalog that we've already got cataloged in the background, and there's a direct match for those. The logical entities that we've got over here in green, they indicate that based on its intelligence, it thinks that to answer and create your data product, it needs these particular logical entities. Yeah. The logical entities that we've got here in the gray, it has created a set of generated, AI-generated entities which it thinks you will also require based on your requirements, but it's showing those up in gray. And the idea with those is once we've got those logical entities, it helps us to understand what is the logical layer to answer that data product, to create that data product. But what we now want to do is to look at what are the physical assets which will satisfy or fit in with that logical layer in there. And so what it's done, it's already gone in and said, okay, at each one of the logical entities, so for example, at the pipeline snapshot, I've got potentially these physical assets from the data catalog which could match to those. Yeah. And here's the degree of confidence, it's got a 100% match or an 83% match. And what we can do is we can go along and change, and obviously this will require some subject matter expert to get involved at this stage to help us identify which ones would be the best fit in here. But we can proceed to do this, and over here it's working away, and it's gone from 3, 4 up to 15 assets or 13 assets at the moment, which it's identified and we've mapped in there. So once we've done this, we can actually save a version of this. And the purpose of saving the version is that we might want to come back to it and refine it or have somebody else review it or work with it. But we can save a version. We can also export this version. So if you want to refine the data model that you've got here at the physical layer, we can export it out into the Urban Data Modeler, and you can refine that within there. And then, of course, you can bring it back into here as well. So we're not going to do any of those, but what we can now do is to go along and publish those assets out into the data marketplace. And what this will do is it will give us the opportunity to publish the assets. But remember, the data product is not complete. It requires some additional work to help us to complete this. But as a starting point, what it does, it produces for us a data product with a given name, with a description, and the ability to be able to edit and modify that. So based on what we've got in here, we're going to flick over into the marketplace and take a quick look at the data product that's been published. So again, in the platform, we can now see the data product that has been published. And it's been published into a particular catalog in here, which is called Alpine. In there, there's already existing 3 sets of data products. There's the one that we're interested in, the sales product one. And immediately you can see in there, we've got some related assets in there. We've got a description. And it gives us the opportunity now to put in who's responsible for the governance, what's the workflow status for this data product, what's its rating, what's its data value score. And it's already got a data value score from the bronze layer, because we've got the ability to be able to go in and look at the data quality scores from the data assets that we've already got. Now, those same data assets that we've got, we can also visualize in a sort of mind map way. So those were the mappings of the logical entities that we made to the physical tables and columns, and these have been mapped into the data product. Now, the data product, as I was saying, is not complete. It requires additional work of the nature that I've shown you. And based on that, to source the data and the delivery mechanism, is it going to be an API? Is it going to be packaged? Is it going to be a live feed? All of that needs to be built up in the development and the publication of the data product. But now that we've published out into the marketplace, that's where people can go along and start to use that. So as a bit of a summary on what we've seen and a bit of a comparison, let's just do that, comparing the traditional approach with the data product factory approach. And so in the traditional approach of creating some sort of data product or data pipeline, there's a requirements analysis stage, whereas what we're doing is we're using natural language in the data products approach. In the traditional approach, we design a data model. Over here, we don't need to do that because it's looking at existing data products. We need someone to help us to architect the solution. Well, we don't need to do that, again, because the solution will automate part of that data modeling for us. we need to apply governance and quality over here. Well, again, we don't need to do that because the assets that we've already got, they already have governance and quality built in to them. We need to build and deploy, and build and deploy over here. We still need to do that because we still need to publish it out and finish it off. But the issue in here, or the benefit in here, is that instead of taking up to 6 months with a high cost, no reuse, we reduce that down to days and months, or sorry, days and weeks rather than months, with a lower total cost of ownership. And the data product becomes something which is governed and reusable. And finally, yeah, you might be thinking, well, I can use a generic AI, to help us on this. But the issue with that is that with using a generic AI, it's grounded in whatever it can scrape. There's no lineage, no ownership. It can hallucinate with confidence. Same query asked multiple times will give you different answers. It's a black box when it fails. You have no idea what happened. Whereas with the ADPF approach, we're creating contracted products. We understand the lineage. We know who's the owner. We've got trust scores. We've got same definitions of the common assets in there. And if things go wrong, well, failure has a phone number. We know who to contact in there. And so if you're thinking about that, consider the fact that, the ALM is only as trustworthy as the data layer beneath it. And the ADPF approach has that data catalog, which you've qualified and have trust in as the basis for developing your data products. And so to develop your better data products, better AI, there are independent people like KPGM telling us that your AI is only as good as the data underneath it. So you need good quality data on there. You need it to be governed, yeah. And good leaders will fix the data layer first, yeah. So a library of governed reusable data products is a structural time to advantage for us in there. And with that, let me hand you back over to Alan.
So your AI is only as good as the data underneath it. If the data is fragmented, undocumented, ungoverned, or rebuilt from scratch for every use case, then AI will only amplify that weakness. But when the data is treated as a governed, reusable product, with ownership, lineage, quality, trust scoring, and marketplace access, it becomes a foundation that analytics and AI teams can build on with confidence. That is the value of the Quest Trusted Data Management Platform. It gives organizations the metadata, governance, lineage, quality, and marketplace foundation required to make data products enterprise ready. And ADPF takes that one step further. It helps accelerate the creation of those data products from business intent, so teams are not starting from zero every time. For any organization trying to scale AI, this is the practical path forward. Start with one domain, build 2 or 3 trusted data products, measure the impact, and then expand. Sandil, in partnership with Quest, can help you take that first step. We go into slide 19. So thank you for your time today. Before we open it up, 2 quick housekeeping notes. Drop your questions in the chat panel anytime. And yes, we'll share the slides and the recording after the session. If one thing stuck with you today, let it be this. Your AI initiative is only as good as the data underneath it, and a 90-day pilot is the fastest way to prove that in your own environment. Sandil, in partnership with Quest, can stand that up with you. The fastest next step is a short conversation. Reach out to the team on the screen, UK or North America. Thanks again. Connect with. So check to see if we've got any